Welcome to the 5 Keys to Communication, when you'll learn to transform negative patterns in the way you relate and create enriching relationships. So this is what happens when the strongest contact to Mercury, which is all about talking and listening, is from Neptune. So imagine your partner has a Mercury-Neptune contact. How do they act? Well, they can be really bewitching, they're poetic, a little vague, very imaginative, but they do tend to embroider the truth. The fantasy is more important maybe than the reality. And they have a tendency to create their own version of reality or go off into their sort of an imaginative sort of dead end or something like that. They don't like confrontation in communication, so they're very good at making kind of smoke screens. And they might say things just to make things feel better. So there's a discrepancy between what they say and what they think to avoid problems. And they have this tendency to mind read. They're very sensitive to the thoughts of the other person, so they kind of think they can mind read. So sometimes they get it wrong. Also, I think when it's really negative, Mercury-Neptune behavior is kind of lying. They can't kind of distinguish between what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And the reason that the people like with Mercury-Neptune aspects act like this is that in their childhood, they kind of needed to be evasive to avoid unpleasantness. Often in school, there was a sort of sense of isolation, being misunderstood. Often there's a kind of inner sadness with Mercury-Neptune. And sometimes it comes from not being heard. They have this experience that what they say kind of dissolves before people kind of grasp it. So it gives them a little bit of a sense of invisibility. So if you're with a person like that, what you need to do is, what might happen, you end up getting kind of confused or disorientated. Sometimes you get like sidetracked, where you wanted to discuss something and you kind of get sidetracked in another area because it's, stuff that's serious tends to get avoided. And you might sort of also end up kind of not knowing what's true or not knowing what's lies. So Mercury-Neptune in a partner's horoscope, it brings an imaginative dimension and it evokes a sense of the myriad possibilities of the human mind. So it can be very mentally stimulating. So what if you have a Mercury-Neptune? What are you doing? You might be very unaware of the things you do, but there's a tendency to avoid confrontation because you just don't want unpleasantness. Or you just prefer to keep things secret or something like that. And you become an expert in sidetracking people, if you like. You can see, the value of not always telling the truth. So a white lie is like better than, the unembroidered truth. But you can also get kind of misunderstood or feel isolated. The sense that people aren't listening, and also you can spend a lot of time imagining stuff that's never going to happen. Your imagination is just like too active. Sometimes you don't get listened to because your voice kind of tapers off, so it kind of gets lower and lower and lower. So you need to kind of make sure that you're presenting your ideas strongly. And you also tend to give up easily when you're trying to get a point across, so you don't want to do that. You want to, you try and get organized in your mind and stick to facts. As a child, probably you had to develop many tactics to avoid getting into trouble. You might have lied to avoid getting into trouble. Isolated at school, you develop a kind of really rich inner life. Because the outer life isn't necessarily ideal. So there's a kind of escapism involved. And what you need to do to make communication go well, always tell the truth, and just take the consequences. So take the hard road, even if a lie would be easier. Don't mind read. finish your sentences, and let other people finish their sentences. And don't hide away in your own thought bubble, and don't get too distracted by unnecessary fantasies. And when you're conscious of this kind of behavior, you'll learn to transform these negative things and channel your imagination into really creative work and ideas.